Okay, you're on.
I'm on. You mean I'm ready to read?
You're ready to read.
Standard 5, Mass Appraisal Development. In developing a mass appraisal, an appraiser must be aware of, understand, and correctly employ those recognized methods and techniques necessary to produce and communicate credible mass appraisals. Mass appraisal includes the following: identifying properties to be appraised, defining market areas of consistent behavior that apply to properties, identifying characteristics which create value in market areas, developing model structures that reflect the relationship of the characteristics, applying the conditions reflected in the models to the characteristics in the properties, and reviewing the mass appraisal results. Standards, Rule 5.1. In developing a mass appraisal, an appraiser must be aware of, understand, and correctly employ those recognized methods and techniques necessary to produce a credible mass appraisal. This standard emphasizes that appraisers must continuously improve his or her skills to remain proficient in mass appraisal. Continuing education is mandated by state licensing administrators and should be a priority of mass appraisers. An appraiser also must not commit a substantial error of omission or commission that significantly affects a mass appraisal, and not render a mass appraisal in a careless or negligent manner. Comment: perfection is impossible to attain, and competence does not require perfection. Standards, Rule 5.2. In developing a mass appraisal, an appraiser must identify the client and other intended users, identify intended use of the appraisal, and identify the type and definition of value, and if the value opinion to be developed is market value, ascertain whether the value is to be the most probable price in terms of cash or in terms of financial arrangements equivalent to cash or in some other terms as may be precisely defined, and if the opinion of value is based on non-market financing or financing with unusual conditions or incentives, the terms of such financing must be clearly identified and be developed by analysis of relevant market data. In developing a mass appraisal, the appraiser must also identify the effective date of the appraisal and identify the characteristics of the properties that are relevant to the type and definition of value and intended use, including the group in which the property is identified, the group with which a property is identified according to similar market influences, the appropriate market area and time frame relative to the property being valued, and the location and physical, legal, and economic characteristics. The appraiser must also identify the characteristics of the market that are relevant to the purpose and intended use of the mass appraisal, including location of the market area, physical, legal, and economic attributes, time frame of market activity, and property interest reflected in the market. Appraisers must also, in appraising real property or personal property, identify the appropriate market area and time frame relative to the property being valued. When the subject is real property, identify and consider any personal property, trade fixtures, or intangibles that are not real property but are included in the appraisal. When the subject is personal property, identify and consider any real property or intangibles that are not personal property but are included in the appraisal. Identify known easements, restrictions, encumbrances, leases, reservations, covenants, contracts, declarations, special assessments, ordinances, or other similar items, or other items of similar nature, and identify and analyze whether an appraised fractional interest, physical segment, or partial holding contributes pro rata to the value of the whole. Appraisers must also analyze the relevant economic conditions at the time of the valuation, including market acceptability of the property and supply, demand, scarcity, or rarity. Identify any extraordinary assumptions and any hypothetical conditions necessary in the assignment, and determine the scope of work necessary to produce credible assignment results in accordance with the scope of work rule. Standards Rule 5.3. When necessary for credible assignment results, an appraiser must, in appraising real property, identify and analyze the effect on use and value of the following factors: existing land use regulations, reasonably probable modifications such as regulations, economic supply and demand, the physical adaptability of the real estate, neighborhood trends, and highest and best use of the real estate. In appraising personal property, identify and analyze the effects on use and value of industry trends, value in use, and trade level of personal property. Where applicable, identify the effect of highest and best use by measuring and analyzing the current use and alternative uses to encompass what is profitable, legal, and physically possible as relevant to the type and definition of value and intended use of the appraisal. Personal property has several measurable marketplaces. Therefore, the appraiser must define and analyze the appropriate market consistent with the type and definition of value. Standards Rule 5.4. In developing a mass appraisal, an appraiser must identify the appropriate procedures and market information required to perform the mass appraisal, including all physical, functional, and external market factors as they may affect the appraisal. This generally entails the development of standardized collection forms, procedures, and training materials. Employ recognized techniques for specifying property valuation models, and the development of models is essential to credible mass appraisal results. See the definition of an appraisal model. IAAO has standards on model building for mass appraisers. Employ recognized techniques for calibrating mass appraisal models. Standards Rule 5.5. In developing a mass appraisal, when necessary for credible assignment results, an appraiser must collect, verify, and analyze such data as is necessary and appropriate to develop when applicable. Cost of new improvements, all forms of depreciation, value of land by sale of comparable properties, value of property by sales of comparable properties, and value by capitalization of income. An appraiser must also base estimates of capitalization rates and projections of future rental rates and or potential earning capacity, expenses, interest rates, and vacancy rates on reasonable and appropriate evidence. Identify and, as applicable, analyze terms and conditions of any available leases, and identify the need for and extent of any physical inspection. AO2 provides advice on inspections and Uspap requirements. IAAO advises mass appraisers on frequency of inspection. State laws stipulate that land-based and aerial photography may be a sufficient form of inspection. Standards Rule 5.6. When necessary for credible assignment results implying a calibrated mass appraisal model, an appraiser must calibrate the mass appraisal model based on three approaches to value: value improved parcels by the recognized appraisal methods, cost approach, sales comparison approach, or the income approach; value sites by recognized methods or techniques, sales comparison approach, allocation method, abstraction method, capitalization of ground rent, and land residual technique. When developing the value of a leased fee estate or a leasehold estate, analyze as applicable the effect of value, if any, of the terms and conditions of the lease. Analyze the effect on value, if any, of the assemblage of the various parcels, divided interest, or component parts of a property. And note, this is a note, this is a note, this is a note. The value of the whole must not be developed by adding together the individual values of the parts. That's the end of that note. Appraisers must also, when analyzing anticipated public or private improvements located on or off the site, analyze the effect on value, if any, of such anticipated improvements to the extent they are reflected in market actions. Standards Rule 5.7. In reconciling a In reconciling a mass appraisal, an appraiser must reconcile the quality and quantity of data available and analyzed, and employ recognized mass appraisal testing procedures and techniques. The value conclusion is the result of the appraiser's judgment and not necessarily the result of a mathematical process.